One head of state is predicting a severe food crisis and a global famine. I'm going to tell you what he said, and I'm going to tell you how nomad capitalists can protect themselves using international strategies. Historically, I never thought of myself as a prepper. I was never stockpiling cans of food. I live internationally, so I'm not, hoarding a bunch of bullets in my garage. But I did see during the pandemic certainly a reason when I started to stockpile the pantry. There were plenty of supplies in Malaysia, where I was at the time, and they were refreshing stuff quite frequently. I said, you know what, let's stock our pantry as full as it can be, just because it was kind of the biggest wake-up call for me of look at the supply chain crisis, look at when things may not be available. I have been, as one person said, more of an economic prepper, where I want to protect myself from what governments are going to do next, what black swan events could happen in the world next. That's why we talk about banking, investing, having brokerage accounts overseas, having multiple residences, multiple passports, multiple income streams, moving your business offshore to protect it from increasing taxes and regulations. But I certainly think, not as a doom and gloom person, but just as someone who wants to be prepared, that having some kind of food security in these last couple of years, which have been more chaotic than ever, is not the worst thing. Now, if it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consultancy that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best, from lower taxes, diversified assets, second passports, more freedom, all of the above. I'm also the host of the biggest and best conference in the offshore world called Nomad Capitalist Live, and it's available to absolutely everybody. Here's the headline from CNBC. The world will face a severe food crisis and famine, says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He warns that the world will face such crisis with Russia's war on his country dragging on as he virtually addressed the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. He told delegates that his country was unable to export enough food because of Russia's blockade at Black Sea ports, which is preventing expats from being shipped to other countries, and on and on. Now, this is not a pro-Ukraine piece. This is not an anti-Russia piece, anti-Ukraine. I'm not saying this with a dog in the fight, and certainly I know from talking to some of you and seeing some of the feedback, people are on different sides of the aisle. I'm not trying to make this a geopolitical conversation, but certainly there have been a number of issues, from supply chain crisis, wars, all kinds of black swan events that have happened and could happen that could impact your access to goods. We've all seen it. I think my access to products in the places where I live is actually not that bad, but there are things that are arriving late. I've been buying more products, which I actually enjoy doing as I'm renovating. I renovated a new property in Malaysia. I bought a lot of stuff that was made in Malaysia to avoid the supply chain crisis because I didn't want to wait forever for stuff to come in. And by the way, I was happy to support the local economy in the process. So this is not just about Ukraine. The story is about the Ukrainian president and his pitch for that. But let's go through it, because this could apply to a lot of things. Ukrainian president warned that the world will face a severe food crisis with Russia's war in his country dragging on. He told delegates he's not able to import enough food because of the Black Sea blockades. The world will face an acute and severe food crisis and famine, he said. Ukraine, along with Russia, are the largest producers and exporters of wheat and other essential foods, like other grains and oils. The food crisis touches Asia, Europe, and Africa. Russia has blocked the Black Sea. Prices are rising. And he goes on. And so I don't necessarily want to talk about the parts that are the geopolitical parts, the war parts, but he is saying, hey, we're a big producer of a lot of the stuff that you eat. We produce some of these materials, and it's hard enough in this 2022 to get stuff shipped around. But he says this is not making it easier. So I'll let you make your own geopolitical conclusions. But what I would suggest is, if you're a nomad capitalist, you want to have some kind of backup plan for as many things as possible. Now, I often tell people to start with protecting your finances, your freedom, and your lifestyle. And if you do those things, you'll be pretty well covered. This could go into the lifestyle category because, food and eating is kind of part of a good life. And so we talk about building infrastructure to make sure that you're protected. Certainly, if you were living in Ukraine and you had nowhere else to go, fortunately, I've been honored to host some folks that I know from Ukraine in one of my properties. I've tried to help out individuals, but you didn't have that many other options. And so if you have only one passport, if you have only one bank account, some other kind of black swan event could impact you. And who knows what could happen when the riots, the looting, the civil unrest, who knows what could happen. You can't get access to cash, the banking system closes down. Again, I'm not a doom and gloom guy, but we've seen too much of this stuff in the last decade of Nomad Capitalist, from bail-ins to all kinds of stuff. So you want to be protected. And so what Robert Kiyosaki, from Rich Dad Poor Dad, said at our conference last year, Nomad Capitalist Live, he said, where can you get in 3 days when it hits the fan? He said, listen, I got a plane. If you can get a plane, you get a plane. One of the guys in the audience said, yeah, I also have a plane. And everyone else in the audience said, no, I don't have a plane. But however you get somewhere, it doesn't have to be that far away, but how are you going to have access to protect yourself, to get away from the chaos, to get away from the madness, and potentially to be able to, to have access to food? This would have to be relatively apocalyptic, but here's where it comes into the nomad capitalist sphere. If I can buy productive land that gets me residence or citizenship in another country, I'm giving myself a backup plan, among other backup plans, and I'm giving myself something that I need as part of my international infrastructure in the process. So if I look at a number of countries in Central America, I can buy property there, and I can get residence. Now, you could make an argument for some of the Central American countries, which have had higher levels of personal freedom, government leaves you alone. You could look at a place like in Nicaragua. You could look at a place like Honduras, probably not the mainland, but maybe on Roatan. Perhaps harder to get enough land to grow food on an island, but you could certainly do that. Belize has been talked about. Panama, you can go. Costa Rica, all places in Central America. Costa Rica perhaps being them, and Panama being among the most stable, the higher standard of living. You can go in, you can buy property, and you can get a residence permit. Potentially, if you live there, you can work towards citizenship in some of those countries. You could also make an argument for parts of southern South America, which is just kind of totally away from it all. I can tell you, I flew from Bogota, Colombia, to Montevideo, Uruguay last year. I was already in South America. That felt like a flight to the edge of the world. Imagine you're coming from somewhere else. I mean, how far are you from Russia and Ukraine and the US and China and everything that's going on in the world when you're in Uruguay? And so prices are higher down there, but you can buy productive land. Pretty much the whole country is land, where they're doing agriculture or they're doing livestock for the most part. And so you can buy land, and if it's too expensive for you, you can go next door to Paraguay. And so those places are possibly further removed from the world. Obviously, some of the countries in Central America, depending on where you are, it's a little bit more intense in some areas. Chile is certainly heading in the wrong direction. It's one of the most expensive places to buy agricultural property in that part of the world, but you can certainly do that, and they have some great agricultural property. Ecuador, we've talked about, $40,000, you get a residence permit. Peru, I probably wouldn't put my confidence in for residence. But bottom line is, Latin America, you can buy land and you can get residence. In parts of Eastern Europe, we've talked about Serbia. We did a whole tour of looking at homes on land. You can get an acre or a hectare or whatever amount of land you want. Now, if you're a foreigner, you may need to buy it with a house on it. It may need to be, hey, I've got a house and there happens to be a big backyard. And we showed you a couple of years ago property in Vojvodina, Serbia, in the north, near the town of Novi Sad, where you can buy something for 12,000 euros, 15,000 euros. Those prices haven't dramatically changed. Yes, prices in Belgrade have gone through the roof even since I bought my property a couple of years ago, but prices in the villages often don't go up that much. And so you can find plenty of things. I went last year the other direction from Belgrade to central Serbia, to the Shamadia, and it's even a little bit cheaper down there because of kind of the historical layout of the country. The Shamadia is cheaper, and southern Serbia is even cheaper. And so you can buy property there, likely going to be a house with some property, but there were people with chickens running around, people growing all their own food, and there were people who were relatively self-sufficient. By the way, I can tell you, having been in Serbia at the very time when I was seeing people posting pictures of the US with empty shelves, the shelves were full. Take that for what it's worth. But the bottom line is, in Latin America, and in Eastern Europe, Albania is another country, Georgia. Armenia has pretty open laws for foreigners on owning land, which is partially why it's more expensive land than in Georgia. Perhaps the diaspora buying land also affects that. Georgia has some restrictions, but again, if there's a house, you can generally do that. So those are areas that have been more open, where you can go Again, you can get a residence permit, which you should probably have anyway. And so for people who like the idea of protecting themselves against a food shortage and they want to be able to figure out, okay, when things look like they're getting harried. Now, I always tell people, are you going to be able to exactly predict when the food crisis is coming and get on the next flight out? Maybe if you have enough stuff stockpiled, maybe you live in a city and you see chaos coming to your country, you get on a flight at that point. As you kind of deplete your stockpiles and you go to your second place. Now, if you're in the United States, is getting to Serbia going to be as easy as getting to Nicaragua? Perhaps not. I mean, Mexico is a country that I've said is part of the great American Plan B if you're an American, because you could just literally drive in. You could walk in and then you could get to your property there, and they certainly allow people to own property as well. So you can choose where you want the property to be, but the point is, Mexico, not a country where you're generally going to qualify for residence based on real estate, though. So if you can combine these two, fine. Buy a property in Mexico for property's sake, get the residence just because you can, just because you have the money in the bank. But use this as an opportunity. If you're concerned about the next black swan event, it doesn't have to be a food crisis. Figure out what that is and figure out how you could use an international strategy to protect against that, where you've got a place where you can go. I think having a second home is a good thing because it gets you out of your country and it gives you a sense of confidence and a sense of comfort that if things do get bad in your country, hey, we got a place to go. Is that going to be, for some of us, a 15,000 euro farmhouse with some land in Serbia's Šumadija? Maybe not. By the way, spring for the fancy one. Spend 30 grand. But, you know, I think having more assets outside of your country, by the way, you've got a residence, open a bank account, put some money there, report it in your home country if you have to, but, you know, start diversifying further. Having a place where you feel comfortable is the first step to following Robert Kiyosaki's advice that he told our audience and having 3 days to get out. Because if you've never been to this place, then you're not as likely to go there. I think having a second passport is a great idea. I think it's absolutely essential for many people. And we've done many Caribbean citizenship by investment passports for our clients. But if you've never been to St. Kitts and Nevis, you're probably not going to feel comfortable going there when things look dicey. Other people have said, oh, well, it's an island, how, you know, is it going to be safe? Listen, have the passport there and have the residence, have the property, maybe have the bank account somewhere else, okay? Protect yourself from these black swan events. Again, food crisis or not, one way to do it is you can buy land in many of these places. You can buy land in Asia too. There's a smaller list of countries. It's generally more expensive. And so putting yourself in smaller population countries like a Serbia, which, you know, are more homogenous. Putting yourself in Latin America, which is more immigrant friendly. To me, that's an opportunity to get away from world chaos, whatever it may be, and you can get some free goodies along the way.